Thank you for having me back again. It was a pleasure speaking with the SEA guys. It's just such a wonderful community, and I encourage the guys who are attending, please spread the word, because I have gained so much from this, being a part of this. So it's always a pleasure coming back. Yes. So recently I've joined Prima, an amazing insurtech company, and I'm really excited to be the part of their global initiative that they're going for. It's like I said, it's an insurance company, car insurance company that started in Italy and really grew from there. And now they're starting their global journey, and I'm a part of that team that looks after the whole energy behind their global ambition. So but this story that I want to tell you is about the company I used to work for, 288 Group, still very close to my heart. Really enjoyed my time there, and it's just an excellent part of the journey. But there are some learnings and some important key points and stuff that I always wish that I was able to share with the wider community, because a lot of the times I have been able to share things about it, but they have been more on a higher level. And I thought to myself that perhaps there is value in kind of highlighting how to implement some of those strategies or some of the vision of the business. So to give you a little bit of a background, 288 Group were going through this massive transformation when they hired me, especially to run and look after the whole transformation effort. And the reason was that the company had quite old technology, and they wanted to refresh that and bring everything to the modern world. But in addition to that, it wasn't just a digital transformation effort. It was actually the transformation of all of the business processes as well. So the vision was this hugely highly competitive e-commerce business that they would like to become, and they wanted to be ahead of the game. They wanted to use the most modern tech and actually get there quite fast as well, which is, as software projects go, that a lot of the companies, they want to have that competitive edge. Therefore, velocity, speed, and all those kind of things are just extremely important. So those were the things that were important for them as well. So the task at hand was huge. They had a small tech team that was mostly doing just support work and small feature development, and they weren't really equipped to deliver on this massive vision of the future for the company that would set the foundations for the future of the company. So this task, when I got assigned with that, it was a huge undertaking, I believe, and I think that at some point, I found it extremely overwhelming as well, because it wasn't a small challenge. I would like to highlight that Alan and Julia were a part of that journey as well. And I did reach out to them for help, and they were an absolutely amazing asset for consulting with us and helping us through that. I'll be able to highlight a bit more about their role as we describe it a bit more, but I do have to give credit to them as well for helping us create this kind of implementation. And so I want to start off by saying, when you have this huge challenge, where do you start? We sort of divided the whole solution into two key areas. One was business alignment, and I'll go into the details of that. And the other was strategic vision and the implementation of it. So to give you a little bit of a background, the business wasn't fully aligned with the software engineering teams at the stage where I joined, and there were several reasons. We were a small team, like 10 to 12 people. However, within that, there were several bureaucratic processes, and information wasn't flowing through the system very well. Which meant that a lot of the tasks and the projects that the business would have liked us to deliver, we were simply not able to deliver or not able to understand it fully. So the stuff we were even delivering was just not what they asked for, and they would not get informed in time about any delays, and therefore the moment when it is time to go live and they're expecting this thing, would just tell them, oh, actually, it's not ready. So it was all very, very delayed, and it wasn't the ideal situation. So communication was a huge problem. We didn't really have a strategic vision of the future either. We did not know beyond what was next to do. And this was the reason why we weren't able to plan around bigger initiatives like this digital transformation effort. So the change that happened was these in two main areas, that we were able to implement different practices and use different tools in order to align ourselves with the business and deliver on the key strategic vision. With business alignment, there were a few things that we did. The first and foremost was just having conversations. And I think that it is perhaps the most underrated thing in companies nowadays. Yes, documentation is great. Yes, there's always a process, but a conversation, an in-depth conversation with the key stakeholders is so important when you are setting off on that kind of a journey in order to deliver something of that magnitude. It was hugely important for the future of the business, the future existence and the survival of the business as well. So we could not take anything for granted. And we had to have those conversations with the business in order to understand fully what was needed. We really needed to understand the full extent of the ambition for them, what it really meant for them, and extracting those things out and making sure that we are taking them into consideration when we are building the practical sides of it. We also made sure that we're talking about key frustrations of those stakeholders. So we will say, just really open conversations about what is it that is really frustrating you. And it was eye-opening about how honest and transparent the stakeholders were. They were really worried about the skill level we had. Did we actually have the team to deliver? They weren't sure. They did not know how the progress was going for various initiatives. So they never knew where we were, whether we were going to fail or succeed. So it was just like every time it was a huge gamble whether we were ever going to deliver. At some point, we were never delivering. So these frustrations were the key themes that came out of those conversations. And we were initially just in the exercise of noting them down, making sure that they feel they're heard, they got the stage, and they could say whatever their frustrations were. Then we built a relationship based on transparency and accountability. In terms of transparency, the best friend you will ever have is data. We use data to show them where we were. And we held ourselves accountable, and they could hold us accountable to the things that we were presenting. And one of their key frustrations was that when they requested any data, so for example, how many bugs are in production? How long does it take you to fix a bug if it's in production? How many times, if you deploy to live, you end up in failure? How many times do you have to roll back? And a lot of those metrics that a company is really interested in, we weren't able to deliver to them. And this was partially because we did not have the right tools to gather all the data. And the other thing was that sometimes it was felt that perhaps if we don't show it, then they wouldn't be able to question. But I guess that in a way it was detrimental to the way we were working, because if we weren't collecting the data, that meant that we did not know how to focus our attention to the areas we needed the most improvement in. So we were kind of doing ourselves a disservice by not getting the data through and the transparency. And we also determined with them about what good looks like, Because what used to happen is that they used to come up with these weird and wonderful things that they would like the product to achieve. And we would just go in and we reimagine them and think about things, okay, that's probably what they want, and then just kind of work our way through it. But the idea was that, you know, we wanted to have this clear conversation about what would be acceptable on day one. What is the minimal viable product that they would accept without all the bells and whistles? And is there a way of incrementally delivering it while still building the main core foundations for the massive system that they wanted to build? And those conversations were extremely important in creating business alignment. So that was the starting point. But I would say that the most important lesson out of all that is that business alignment is not a one-off thing. It is an ongoing effort. We have to keep them on board all the time, which meant that we had to give them progress reporting, has to be regular. We have to, again, create the transparency. So we created dashboards for them to view about how we were doing. We were upfront about the delays that we were, if any delays, and what is the impact and what is the mitigation. Again, you know, our risk register was quite, you know, it was very open to them and visible, and we would openly own our mistakes along the way. We all make mistakes, and I think that there is a lot of pride, not pride, but I would say probably a lot of courage in saying that we have completely messed it up, or we have got this bit completely wrong, but we have data to guide us, and now we know what is the range of our error, and we will use the data to guide us in making better decisions. So you improve as you go along, and that's the principles we used in business alignment. The next part I want to get to is the strategy of really aligning and implementing the vision, and what we did to achieve that. The strategy in itself, and in order to deliver, there were three key areas that we thought that we wanted to pay attention on. The first one, and the foremost, and perhaps the most ignored part in a lot of software engineering culture, the people. I think that a lot of the times companies do the mistake of looking at people like, I guess, a machine. You input some money and out comes software, but it doesn't work that way, because I think that a lot of the times people are different, and a lot of the times people are underrated in their impact. We shouldn't do that mistake, and we were not going to do that mistake. The next thing was technology. What technology to use? How do we use technology so it helps us, not hinders us? What tools to select, and what are the things that are actually going to provide the solution to the business and align itself with the vision and their ambition. And delivery. So like I explained to you before, we were pretty bad at delivering things. So how do we move from that pattern into just a chaotic, make it up as you go along methodology to actually applying and running a program and deliver the program? So this is a whole mind shift and a cultural shift on the part of the technology teams as well as the business. It is really important to understand that any type of transformation program, if you are doing that, or a large program, if you are delivering that, the cultural shift that needs to happen isn't just in the software teams. It has to go above in your leadership. It has to go even further to the business. Everybody needs to be aligned and understanding at every level about what you are delivering and why you are doing things that you're doing. What is the impact of it? What is the value that they're going to get out of that? The clearer you can make all those things, the easier the communication becomes for you. So now going along some of the things that we did in those areas, the rest of the presentation kind of covers the tools and practical implementation of some of the things we did. Again, you know, this is not an exhaustive list, and I would recommend people trialing things and using and seeing what works for them. because different situation requires different methodologies and different tools. I would also like to acknowledge here that, this was the time when I got help from Alan and Julia, because it was something, the scale of it was huge. So I wanted to get expert advice on that, and they were extremely helpful in making sure that we were doing the right thing and making the right decisions as well. First of all, so people. There were a few things we did in order to create the culture, and these are the things that helped us. Again, going into the practical side of it. We created an engineering job ladder. So this is something that different engineering cultures implement differently. The way we did it is that we defined the roles and responsibilities at every level of engineering. We needed to understand, one, where people wanted to go, but also have a very transparent communication with them to make them understand what the expectations were from their roles. What are the responsibilities? And we also went out and did salary benchmarking, which meant that we were aligning the salaries of the engineers with where the market was going. And this exercise was extremely important because I think we have all probably witnessed or heard about situations where existing engineers who have worked for a company for a few years sometimes get paid less than some new hire that the company really wants to get in, even though the new hire might not have the same skill set or experience level or even the business knowledge. And therefore, when you assess it, do you think, well, is this person really bringing the same value as the other person who's worked for the company loyally for many years and is working really efficiently at that level? So, even though you might think that this is confidential, but what we found was that engineers were talking to each other and information gets out, and that was hugely detrimental, and that was something we were wanting to fix. So we made the whole of salary benchmarking transparent. So you knew exactly what level you were at and what to expect at every level. And as you brought in more and more value, you obviously your salary and your seniority increases as well. Not seniority, sorry, your job title got better, or you got promoted. The thing to kind of highlight here is that a lot of the companies do this mistake of perhaps promoting people by seniority. If they have been they are there for a long time, they must be a senior or must be that. Instead of that, what we chose to do was to promote people by ability, not seniority. Therefore people who might have been there for 6 months could be a senior, and people who might be there for years, but if they are delivering the value and they are performing at a junior level, they will stay a junior. So that was very much like that. So the transparency really helped us because people really appreciated knowing exactly where they were and exactly where the people coming in would be. If we were hiring a senior, it would always be in the senior bracket. And the brackets were made quite large so that people could move in between very easily and progress in their roles as they brought in more value. We worked on quarterly objectives, which meant that these are the objectives that are learning and development for the people who have joined us. So they are not project objectives. They are just personal to the people, and we cater to every single individual. And it might be, some people need better presentation skills, communication skills, and all sorts of things. And so we will provide them the training, the coaching that is needed. And their quarterly objectives would change and update. This is not something you have to meet. This is something that is making you a better and better developer, well-rounded developer. And as you mature in that, you might actually now be bringing much more value to us. Therefore, your salary increases, your job role becomes better and better, and you have more influence. So this all linked to that. We also designed a skills matrix so that we knew where our gaps were. We had, we completed it every quarter. So it was a self-assessment based thing. And then your line manager will sit down with you and do skills analysis. And then we will, over a department wide, we will do a skills gap analysis and find out where exactly our weak points were, so that when we went out to do recruitment, we could actually hire for the gaps that we had. Having said that, it doesn't stop us from hiring junior and graduates, which is a completely different way of hiring, because at the time when we started, the need was we had to hire a lot of very skilled people to do different types of things and specific things. And what we found out that the people that we had already were fairly junior in those things. So initially we did hire people who were more experienced, but as we became maturer in the model, we got graduates and juniors in who could actually grow with us. So that's how that works. Rules of engagement is also another activity we did. So that's kind of like a team charter we built together, and that was it was guided by the company values, but it's also the values of the people who are working together and how they would like to be treated, with respect, and we'll be honest with each other and we'll respect each other's opinions and we'll be creative and stuff like that they wanted. So it was an exercise between the teams, and they created this rules of engagement. That was the agreed charter, and we printed it out and we put it up there on one of our whiteboards for everybody to see, and we were very proud of that and we lived by them. Another important thing is the feedback loop. Now, feedback is an interesting one. We found that a lot of the times in engineering cultures, but in other cultures as well, feedback is obtained from people, but then nothing happens off the back of that. It is very important that if you are doing feedback, you make sure that actions that are coming off the back of feedback are easily traceable by people. So you could use you could even use like a shared spreadsheet somewhere where people can really see what is happening with their feedback. And if you can't action something, one point or the other, you're even able to share that. The reason for that is that, you're better off not asking for feedback if you're not going to do anything about it. If you ask for something and people are honest to give you the opinion, please don't make them feel like their opinion is worth nothing. That was something that is hugely important for us, that we are making sure all feedback is heard and we reply to all of it. And we had weekly one-to-ones with our engineers, and your line manager will sit down with you, get your feedback, work on your quarterly objectives, work on your career and building you up in the company and outside as a well-rounded developer. But outside of that, we had retro to look at our sprints and find out what went wrong and what we could do to improve. And then we had a department-wide session where people could submit anonymous feedback, and the department leadership would stand and answer to all of those and explain and all that. And those sessions were extremely helpful. And towards the end of it, we got feedback like the people felt that they were heard, and they could explain it so much that towards the end of it, I was there for 2 years, and towards the end of it, people were like, well, I mean, I already mentioned this and something has already happened. So there was very little left until the department-wide one, which was the whole point. You should have several opportunities to say things, and if they're addressed in time, then you don't feel like you're not heard. Action register, as I explained, we have a set point so that people can track how we're working on the impediments, and expectations of excellence that we set out all through this communication is so important to say, what is the expectation? People are not aiming blindly. They know which direction we want them to go to. So that's all about people. Then move on to technology and some of the practices that we use, some of the approaches that we used in order to implement that. Now, not every architectural approach is applicable across the board, so there is a caveat there, but this is some of the things we did and we might be helpful to you. Um, the MARC approach, so microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless, that's a huge kind of a movement within the e-commerce world right now. And the whole thing around composable architecture, that's the principles we used. And we were looking at a lot of the trends that were going on, making sure that what we were implementing was the latest and greatest, because we were, like I said, building the future of this business, and they had put a lot of their faith in us. And therefore, we had a responsibility of making sure that the decisions we were making were well informed and they were for the best of the company. Again, like with any approach, I would say that's not just architecture or technology, that even for any practices you want to introduce, fail fast, try something, trial, POC, be ready to change quickly in case of failure, and accept it and own it, and then move on. A lot of the times whatever we trialed, it was successful, we carried on, improved it, and if it failed, then we knew to look for other options. We also had very transparent conversations about what was the service level agreements for different engineering services. So we already had the existing systems that we had to support. So what are the expectations on that? And what are the expectations for the new systems we were building? Because those SLAs would guide our architectural choices, and our strategies and all that. And making sure that our customer data platform, which is the uniform view of the customer, they are analyzing the real-time trends and making sure that we are integrating data in a way that it is readily available for the business to use for their new campaign. We also worked alongside partners, which meant that external and internal teams, this was the first time their software engineering team reached out to outside to say which teams are actually able to help us deliver it faster. So one of the options was that there was this business analysis team that could do small applications on a low code or no code platform. And then they were able to produce some of the stuff that could give us an interim solution to move forward quickly. So why not partner with them? So that's really important, to explore options within the organizations, outside the organizations, find out what can get you faster. So that's another thing we did. And we did a good job in understanding dependencies. So instead of just focusing on one key area at a time, we had a larger picture of where we wanted to go. And it might not have been fully defined, but we roughly knew the interactions of it, and which helped us determine what might be the crossovers and what might be the dependencies, which again helps us in making those choices. In terms of infrastructure, again, we went, as I said, it was all cloud-based. This is the first time we used continuous integration and deployment and delivery for the business. This was the first time we introduced that to that. Before that was all manually done, and obviously it takes a long time. We got to a point where we were deploying several times a day, which is moving on from one deployment every 3 months to actually deploying several times a day was a huge shift. And obviously automating the DevOps way of working and actually incorporating DevOps practices really helped us. We use static analysis tools like Sonar Cloud that automatically analyzed all of our code, and all of the work that the guys were doing, the build would break if the static analysis would break, and that gives you psychometric complexity. It gives you any new bugs, code smells, and any test failures and test coverage, sorry. So you can set up metrics to say if it doesn't match any of our criteria, then please fail the build. So it just doesn't build, and therefore the people have to go in and fix those problems before it can build and move on. So it really helped us creating the overall view, and it also created reports for us. And this is the data that we use eventually to figure out how well we were building these things. The code that was generated and the pull requests and stuff, we found that in terms of implementation, a lot of the times people used to do major changes and then they will merge in the code. And that was proving to be very difficult. And it always has got merge issues. And but what we decided to do was to do frequent PRs, smaller changes, break down the work into smaller chunks, and so that we can frequently deploy and frequently be able to merge things and keep the code up to date, which worked really well for us. Again, sometimes you have to see whether you are putting things together in order to release them, but we used all of that in order to make sure that we are working fast. We had security analysis tool automated as well on the pipelines, which was called Sneak. It generated reports about security issues with the code. That again, is a very transparent way of finding out where the loopholes might be. And we use that to help us in terms of understanding better security vulnerabilities. We did cost analysis. So with everything deployed in Azure, we had cost analysis, and the reports were generated per team, per area. So we really had a good idea about how much we were spending on what type of infrastructure we were building, what was costing the most, why was it costing. So if you wanted to separate it out by environment as well, we knew exactly what the cost for a dev environment versus a test environment versus pre-prod versus prod environment was. And that really helps, again, highlight highlight what the good decisions are, bad decisions are, and then you learn from it, and going forward, you make better decisions. We also had automated testing, and the static analysis to the Sonar Cloud also makes sure that you can keep test coverage up to a certain point. 80% was our coverage, so it's all new code that is written has to have 80% coverage, otherwise the build would fail. But other than that, we also had automated, obviously, on the pipelines, the tests were running. We had integration tests as well as unit tests, and that worked really well for us as well. We also had backup strategies. So now again, we wanted to understand from the SLAs. They defined what sort of backup strategies we would need to have, whether we need to have any redundancy there, and that kind of guided all of those decisions as well. So now we come to the delivery of it, moving forward from very specific technical details. You start off by looking at the entirety of program roadmap, because we didn't have one. And to understand really what comes where and what teams are going to work on which bits. This whole business effort, so 288 Group isn't just one business, it's actually several businesses within the umbrella of 288 Group, which meant that at a program level, you have visibility of all of the initiatives that are running underneath that. Every program would have milestones, and then those milestones will tell the business exactly what we're going to be delivering every quarter. That quarter, then within that quarter, we will generate reports every 2 weeks, which will go back to the business and tell them this is how we're doing on each milestone. And that's how we kind of kept track of everything and informed everyone. We also created streamlined teams, and it meant that we had this major functional areas split, which makes the merge and release process very easy, and also creates the ownership of that particular domain very comfortable with the people who are working in it, because they know what they own, they know what they're going to be held accountable for, and they take a lot of pride in that, because they know they are holding the future of that particular domain, and then they build according to that. We planned every quarter, and I think that really helped. And now this planning is not like the safe-based planning. This is just to figure out what the delivery milestones are, and then finding out whether we were able to actually do everything we said we're going to do in the last quarter, what is the impact on the overall roadmap of that, and then communicating that with the business. So that was an extremely helpful exercise. All of the feedback of the timelines coming from the software engineering teams. So even though the business had this overall view, they were very much guided by when can you deliver. So the teams had got a lot of ownership of the timescales and their commitments. So they would always give commitments that were high confidence, and in order to do that, they needed to understand what they were delivering. So that exercise every quarter, in the beginning of every quarter, was really useful for us for that program. And we collected the data in terms of team efficiency, velocity, release cadence, quality, across those metrics, and we were transparent with the business about those things. I mean, I would also say that not every metric is interesting for the business. So if you, if I went there and I presented a cumulative flow diagram to them, they would look at me like, I don't know how to read that graph. So this is a learning by error, really, and trying to find out what is going to work. So finding out that sweet spot where they're happy to get the information, but it is available out there for them if they wanted to know. But for us, it's very important to know, you know, for example, the cumulative flow will give you exactly how long it's taking, items are taking in every stage of your process. So if you want to find out really how to streamline and increase velocity, it will tell you this is the blocker, basically. This is where the items are taking the longest. So you can look at your entire workflow guided by the cumulative flow diagram. So that was really helpful. One of those things we used. And again, presenting to stakeholders, we did that at the end of every quarter, and we celebrated the successes of the team and outlined the commitments of the next quarter. But even during the quarter, we had every couple of weeks, we sent them reports, you know, in your good old traffic light system, just to allow them to see whether we were on track or not on the commitments we had made. Again, you know, at the same time, we were holding the fort with the business as usual and support stuff, and every team was responsible for taking on the responsibility of their system. But we also had a dedicated team that was handling the current systems, and they were supporting that and making improvements along the way. So some of the guiding values behind all of it, and I have to admit, I did not come up with that. We did this whole exercise with the teams, and we asked them to come up with the main things they think are the guiding values. Now, we had already done the exercise behind, you know, the team charter, and they had worked in this system for over a year and a half when we did this exercise. And these are the three things that overwhelmingly people said define how we work. Trust, that teams are trusted and to do their job, and trusting their word as well as their work. And I think that we always did a really open and honest conversations with them, always trusted them to do their job and to know the best solutions and to present the solutions. And that was really one of the foundations of our culture. Autonomy. And it wasn't a top-down culture at all. I am not keen on that anyway. And I think that the experts know best. And as leaders, we need to make sure that we are enabling them and asking the right questions, the right people. And so that was very much a part of that. And ambition, obviously, we were aiming high, challenging ourselves all the time, looking at all of the things we could do better. And one of the things that we did in every retro, how could we actually do better? What are the things we could change? What are still the niggles that we think, well, you know, if it was done a bit better, it would have been easier. This could have been done better. Anything like that we looked at, and a lot of self-reflection there, and we learned from our mistakes, and then made a commitment to improve every day, and we did. Some of the results, although this is again not an exhaustive list, I'll probably fill in 3-4 slides if I did that. We increased the reliability of the existing system by 86%. Bugs found in production gone down by 67%. The 40% increment in these existing monolith systems. So we kind of even though we knew that we were going to replace those systems, we still kept getting improvements in, to the point where a lot of people who don't see what happens at the back was thinking, oh, is the new system already live? Because it seems like this is a brand new system. And it was actually already the improvements we could make through all of those practices and looking into things and addressing quality issues and all that. And our engagement got, as you know, skyrocketed. We never had a more engaged engineering team. We were getting feedback all the time, and we got our sentiment score, which the company took every month. It went up by 70%. We were very low before, and we were, you know, in terms of positive sentiment, we were one of the highest rated, highest voted teams in there. But in addition to that, like I said, I explained to you, you know, our release cadence went from once in 3 months to several times a day, which is by any means just a huge difference. And the speed where we weren't able to deliver, we you know, either we were committed to either keep or beat our commitments. And I think that there are always in every program, every project and initiative that you take on, there are some unknowns. And we were very open about building in contingency. However, also being honest to the business about what the impact was, and really going back to them with the solutions of how we're going to address any delays. And that had a really positive impact as well. So that's kind of everything I wanted to share. Open to questions now. Thank you very much for listening.
So Seemin, on the technology slide, we had a question in the chat. So yeah. Isabel wrote, totally agree on partnering, not only to complete organization gaps, but in some cases, if there's an interest to gain knowledge as well. Did you also use static analysis to ensure that standards that should have been used while coding were being followed?
Yes, so that is a huge thing that you have to always make sure that you're doing. So if, for example, you hire an external company to help you, we didn't partner with a lot of agencies to do work on our behalf, but we did partner with some. But any code that they submitted went through the same checks that they would in our engineers. So the standards were kept very, very high in those things. And you have to do that because ultimately the agencies would disappear and you will have to maintain that code. So if you're not doing that, then you will end up, you know, either having to rewrite or maintain really crappy code.
So I just invite everybody to unmute or type a question in the chat. One of the questions that I had, Seemin, was for Azure DevOps, the data analysis that you did you have any trouble getting people to capture the actual data? Like I find that people use those tools really well to estimate, but then, you know, I think they mark things done, but not really much more data than that.
So it depends. I think that the way we set up Azure DevOps as a tool itself, a tool is a tool. I think many tools have got their own downsides and upsides and stuff. But when we were using that, if you start collecting data, so it automatically collects a lot of information for you. So for example, when you create tasks and when you start them, when you do your first commit, when it goes into testing, does it actually come back? How many stages, how long it actually took to do all of that? So your lead times and all those kind of things, it automatically captures. Then you can link it up with Power BI and extract a lot more data out of it. You can also find out, you know, if you want to find out by teams and like I said, you know, time spent in every stage of the workflow, all of that data is automatically captured if you are using it for full flow of your, you know, full workflow.
Okay, and Anna has a question. How did you build trust on both the software engineering and the business leadership sides? It seems like the relationship was very eroded when you came in. I had a very similar question because sometimes the engineering teams don't get trust because they're not quite trustworthy. So
yeah, I think this is a really important question, and I would say oh, I mean, the day I arrived, and I think Alan's here, so it's like very embarrassing, but I want to quote something from his book, right? Because he said that the day you get a job, and you arrive at a problem, whether it was a direct consequence of your actions or not, the day you accept the job, you also accept its past and its future. So when I walked into that job, it was my problem. So the first thing I did was to go and apologize to the business about the awful treatment they've been getting, because it was my problem, it was my team, it was my responsibility to restore their trust. And I think once you do that and you stop making any excuse, this is my experience anyway, to say, oh, that person was rubbish. That wasn't the case. I would always say, my problem, we have treated you awfully, and I apologize for that. We're going to change things, and this is how we're going to do it. And then you highlight all of those things to them, and then say, this is how we're going to achieve that. This is how we're going to communicate with you. And then you keep them on the same page along the journey, and then you carry on around there. And I think that really helps. That's the business side. In the technology engineering side, I am a software engineer myself, and I shared a lot of the frustrations they were facing. So the main problems they had was there wasn't transparency around the job, their job ladder, and how they can progress and improve and learn different things. So we did that. They did not have autonomy because, software engineers are creative people. They like to create solutions. They're passionate about them. So they had the ownership and the accountability with it, but they were happy with that because they want to be creative. They want to have all of that. So transparency, listening to them. So if something was said, even if you were a junior engineer who's just joined yesterday and you had something to say, I, as a head of department, was there explaining to you in front of everyone why we're doing one thing or the other. So made sure that every voice is heard. That is very important in building trust.
Okay, Christian Garcia has a question. He says, I'm a mechanical engineer taking the Flatiron boot camp for software engineering, full stack. Is your experience something that's typical in tech? Is the business process that you implement typical of most companies?
I think that I would say there's always a caveat. There's no one size fits all. You have to understand really the business, but there are some principles that I hope I've shared with you that you might be able to take away from and implement in other environments. So the bit around trust is similar. If a business, you're finding that the engagement is low between business and the engineering teams, there is a bit there for you to do. There are some ideas that you can implement. Again, your stakeholders would be different, their nature would be different, they might not be open, or they might be a bit too disappointed or something. And I think then every relationship is important, but there are some key principles. Again, fire up your data metrics and use that to guide what you're saying, because people really, especially business people, really respond well when you gauge things, you tell them where you're going, and when you're confident in yourself and your ability. And that goes across the board.
I think we have time for one or two more questions, so feel free to either put them in the chat or unmute yourself. I guess, Seemin, I had one last question then. So, you talked a lot about having ambition. When you came in, were there a lot of written goals that they had? Were they explicit about what their goals were and what they were trying to achieve? Or is that another change that you had to make?
I think that overall they had a vision that they wanted. So it's a very, very high level. At a high level, they knew where they wanted to be. But they wanted to get out of these technology, the older tech. They wanted to be a modern e-commerce business. So that was the level. Breaking it down further into what it actually means practically was an exercise we had to do to kind of visualize with them about what they mean by that and what does it look like practically in terms of a program. That is something we had to get into, and that's an exercise we did with them. Again, that is, I count that very much as a part of the journey of building that relationship between your stakeholder and the teams. If you are asking them, they're already thinking, oh, I didn't think of that. Now they're thinking about implementing it. So they're more interested in the whole exercise and the workshop of extracting all that information. Mm-hmm. So that becomes a very interesting exercise as well.